first book, The Perspective, a medical volunteer's experience, was published when he was 18. He has since gone to publish various short stories in the Direction literary journal UCLA's Fem Ha'am news magazine, and had his poem Jews: A History Not Yet Forgotten read on Ruth Sheva, Israel's national radio. David.
Hello, I'd like to address the audience. First of all, I want to say that this conference, this symposium has been amazing. I came in not knowing what it would be, reading of course the papers, but not knowing just the extent of how vast it was covering of Judaism. For example, we had the papers that we had today covered so many aspects of Judaism: mentality. We also had morality, we had creativity, we had theology, we had nationality, and we also had identity. And that's why with my paper, with my presentation, I want to finish off with the idea of life. So, very excited. Perfect birthday gift. This is great. So first thing I want to do is I want to open my presentation with an excerpt from my friend Moti. He recently just joined the IDF as a lone soldier. He went to Santa Monica Community College and went over to Israel, and he just started. And I emailed him asking him how he was doing, how was everything. This was his synchronized response, dated July 9th, 2014, so approximately a month ago. With good news, sometimes bad news comes as well. In the recent days, Tel Aviv has been bombed, Beersheba has been bombed, and just about any place that I've gone to, it has been bombed. Israel started to get into Gaza, and many of the soldiers who are in the reserves are being called up now. Things go up and down, but somehow I just live through it. Last night when I was in Haifa, sleeping over at a friend's house, an Air Force base near where I stayed had the Israeli Air Force fly planes all night to bomb Gaza. There was just a real fear of war. Last night I was afraid, and I will not lie. I was, but this morning, when I was on the train home, I thought to myself, at any moment, I can die. Or my family, or my friends can die. This is the life of Israel. Something just clicked, and it just happened. I'm not afraid anymore. I felt more connected to God this morning than at any other period in my life. I felt that right now, at this moment, if He wanted to take my life, He could. But He hasn't. And that is why I'm only afraid of Him and no one else. These were just the thoughts that are running through my mind. Now I want you to keep this in mind. This excerpt from my friend Moti's email, I'm going to come back to it later in my presentation. So what I found through my research, it's amazing. I found the essence of Judaism and Jewish law. That life is valuable and every day is special. Deuteronomy says that to choose life is to choose the greatest good. That life is the great good. In the Mishnah Sadrin, it says, whoever destroys a soul is considered as if he destroyed an entire world. And whoever saves a life, it is considered as if he has saved an entire world. So what happens when a life is taken? Murdered. But the murderer responsible is left unpunished. What happens when the victim of murder is turned into a criminal herself? This is what happened in 1981 when Steven Steinberg was pronounced innocent after admitting to murdering his wife Elena after stabbing her 26 times in the chest. He made her to be the criminal. In the book, Death of a Jewish American Princess by Shirley Fondorf, I have the book here, writes that Elena was materialistic, a person who shopped and spent, nagged shrilly, and bothered her husband at work, basically turned her into a monster. He turned it around. Why did he do this? To sway the judges in his favor, to play on their prejudices and sexism towards their own wives at home. In court, he claimed he was guilty of murder, but that during the murder he was sleepwalking, a plea of temporary insanity. Not the first time in history when this happened. Has anybody here heard of the Twinkie defense? It's an overarching term for a case in which a man ate a Twinkie, Hostess cupcake, and got so high off the sugar that he killed the mayor. Interesting. Twinkies, gotta stay away from those. So, for both reasons, because A, a murderer got away with murdering his wife, and B, because that wife was turned from a victim of a murder into a criminal, because apparently being a Jewish American princess is a crime, I was not satisfied with the verdict of this trial. And because American law did not seem to give me the verdict I wanted, I went and I turned to Jewish law. I wanted to know how Jewish law would have looked at this temporary insanity defense. Specifically, I wanted to know two things. Would temporary insanity be applicable under Jewish law? Does it even exist under Jewish law? Is there such a thing? If there isn't, maybe there's something similar. And if there is, what are the parameters for determining if someone actually is temporarily insane under Judaism? Then there's a question of punishment for murder. Is it different in light of temporary insanity? Is it harsh? Is it less severe in a given temporary insanity scenario? Are there certain cases where people are not held under such punishment? They're not liable for their actions, they're not held accountable. I wanted to look into this and see. What I found, you will see right now. The answer to my first question, does temporary insanity exist in Jewish law? The answer, yes and no. Yes, because the Talmud defines temporary insanity as one who walks in the cemetery at night and tears one's garments. But this is not always applicable. And that's why the reason is also no, because there's still much debate about that being the only definition for temporary insanity. Instead, the way to look at it is to look and see if there are parameters for determining or assessing this temporary insanity. In the Rambam Laws of Marriage, when a drunk gives a woman kiddushin, they are valid, even if he's very drunk. If he reaches a state of drunkenness comparable to that of Lot, he was totally unaware of what he was doing, as depicted in Genesis chapter 19. The kiddushin are of no consequence. So, the topic brings to the idea of ample deliberation. The point is, there is a concept of temporary insanity because there's a way of measuring states of being. Drunkenness, sanity, temporary insanity. It can be measured, therefore it exists. Now, the answer to my second question, differences in punishment for murder in light of a given temporary insanity. Also not black and white. There are a few cases of Jewish law regarding the different punishments for murder based on temporary insanity, specifically the concept of unintentional killings. Okay? The Rambam's Laws of Murder, chapter 6, describes a scenario. A man, atop a ladder, falls on a man below him and kills him. He murdered a man, but it was unintentional. So there is still a punishment for murder, but it is less severe. He pays a fine to the family. He has to leave the country, but it is still not as severe as murder intentional. Now, regarding individuals that are exempt from the responsibility of their actions, meaning they're not held accountable for their actions, there are only 3 cases described in the laws of sales. A deaf mute, a person who can't hear, can't speak, a minor, a person under the age of 13, and a mentally incapable or emotionally unstable individual. Now, of the 3, I believe that Steinberg fits the 3rd scenario the best. I think he'd have a very difficult time displaying that he's either a minor or a deaf mute. That'd be kind of difficult, I think. I think it's also important to note, though, that while Steinberg was sleepwalking, he told his daughter to leave the room while he was killing his wife. You see, if he was truly temporarily insane, I would think he would say something along the lines of, "Come closer." Something to show more that he's genuinely temporarily insane. Now, my verdict. Using what I learned from Jewish law, I, being not a rabbi nor a professor in the field, would not convict Steven Steinberg of murder. Instead, I would look over the facts and the testimony, and seeing I still would not find his temper insanity defense substantiated. I still do not believe it. But I would convince him of accidental murder. His punishment would be far less severe. But my verdict is not so that it be less severe. On the contrary, my verdict takes into account an integral part of Jewish law and Judaism. This piece is not found in American law. It is found in Jewish law because Jewish law seeks to help those who have done wrong but want to change themselves. Jewish law and Judaism is based in the idea that no one should be declared not guilty, so that someone shouldn't be just declared not guilty in face of the law, but be declared not guilty in face of oneself and God. Jewish law does not simply seek to punish for past wrongs, but seeks to cleanse one's spirit, and as Maimonides put it, not take a frivolous attitude to human dignity and life. This is the overall theme that I've found in Jewish law and Judaism. While there are many shades of black and white and gray in all the fractions of Jewish law and text and spirituality, one thing is clear in Judaism. It is the value of life. The value that each day is special and a gift. That was what my friend Moti understood on the train ride home 4 weeks ago. I believe you don't need to be a lawyer or a rabbi or a professor. I'm a pre-med microbiology major to appreciate the important message that Judaism has to offer the world. That every day is worth living because we have the opportunity to live it. So the next time you wake up in the morning, I want you to remember that today is the day worth living, and I want you to live it exactly the way you want to live it. There is a saying that I love. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. And today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. Thank you very much.
We'll start with President.
Yes, I'd like to push back a little bit on this notion of the American law. Specifically, I agree with your conclusion, by the way, that this guy, Steinberg, should not have walked. I'm kind of surprised that the district attorney didn't plead for involuntary manslaughter, which really would have been exactly sort of like with the hypothetical you mentioned about the person falling on someone. There was no mens rea, to use the Latin. There was no evil intent. There was no desire to do harm. But nevertheless, someone died. It is your fault. There is a connection. That's involuntary manslaughter. It doesn't mean you walk free. It does mean that there is no risk of execution. But it means that there could be a jail term. Probably not life, but could be substantial. I wanted to ask you, though, on page 11 you talk about civil damages, and I wonder whether you thought that almost denigrates the value of life if it can simply be a matter of money rather than imprisonment, even for this sort of non-voluntary or unintentional murder. And what happens if the particular victim has no family? Then what do we award civil damages to? That is, the Jewish law reference about there should be damages paid to the family sort of presumes that this person was an economic factor in that. The other point, and you can take these up in whatever level you want, on the same page you talk about the level of ample deliberation and drunkenness, which has sounds and resonates of measurement. And so I was wondering, how do we calibrate drunkenness? At what point is it count as real legitimacy in terms of an excuse, or when are we going not to? Is this a blood level test? Exactly, how are we going to determine that? Either of those.
Two very wonderful questions. The first one, in terms of property, really wonderful question. I was referring back to the Talmud, that basically it really depends. It even says that it's debated in terms of property, in terms of is it worth, is it leveling life. In terms of property, in terms of comparing, Can I answer your second question?
Either way.
Okay. So, second question is regarding punishment and if he doesn't have a family, correct? So, again, going back to the Talmud, it's a case-by-case basis. So, yes, it is very much, you can't say this person doesn't have a family, so doesn't need to pay. It's not fair. That's not right. However, there is, as you said, there is a punishment. There is there is a wrong done. There must be a way to right it. Because, at least in Jewish law, the essence is to bring someone up, to help them, to make them spiritually lifted. And that requires, again, ample deliberation, which I'll get to in a second. It requires judging it, seeing the scenario, seeing how it works, because a person must understand the point of a punishment, how I see it, is to show that they have done it wrong. That something is wrong and you did this wrong, and you have to understand that you did this wrong, but you punish someone for the rest of their life for something that they did not intend to do. You fell off a ladder, you didn't, this is your friend, you know. There's cases where a person is driving, you know, under the influence. It's terrible to do so, and you can kill someone. And people have done that. They have killed family members and done that. And yes, there is a punishment. There is an internal punishment in terms of you did this, you feel guilty, a natural biological response. But also the law is there to circumvent it, to show in bounds that this is wrong. But it also should show that there is a way to still live your life and not hate each day. Because life is beautiful. I'm alive today. I shouldn't be alive today. I had almost died twice in my life, and I'm happy to be here today. And I want to live each day the way I want to live it. And I think people who want to live it right, even though they've done something, should have the opportunity. That's the first thing. Second is regarding ample deliberation. Regarding ample deliberation, again, it depends. It's one of the best answers I've heard all around. It depends because in terms of cases, for example, drunkenness, we have a breathalyzer test. DUI, you check that in terms of chemically, biologically. In terms of sanity, we had in terms of psychology, how it's determined. It's in certain cases it's less tangible, but there are still levels. And if you set certain boundaries in terms of levels, you can have level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. The first thing that comes to my head, I just had a biohazard lab class. I'm starting research, and it has levels. Level 1 priority, level 2, level 3, level 4, and they each are categorized in terms of what defines each one individually. If you didn't categorize them, it'd be a whole, wow, everything's scary, I don't want to touch any biological hazard. But if this is, chloroform, you know that you put it in a baggie and then you throw it away. And if this is a Ebola virus, then you know not to just put it in a baggie and throw it away. It's a different ample deliberation. And you have to set categories defined. That's my answer.
I'll let others go, but one other idea. On page 12, you mentioned a notion of sin as temporary insanity.
Yes, I found that actually particularly interesting because I at first didn't get that. So what I reasoned what that was, what it meant was Jewish law sees people as so good, inherently good, that it sees any sort of sin as a straying from the normal.
Very good. And so then does that suggest there should be no punishment for sin because it was temporarily insane?
But you see, it depends on the case scenario. Because if, say, like we're going back to, you want to prove, just you don't want to prove, you want to express that someone has did something wrong, for them to acknowledge that so that they go back to the norm of being good if they have the potential to do so and want to do so.
So you're saying punishment is more restorative rather than retributive?
I would hope so.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want,
We can agree to disagree.
Okay.
Yes, you spoke about your friend Moti, and it reminds me, I would like to share with you something that happened last week. You know, Muhammad Def is the head of the military Hamas. this is #1 terrorist in the world, this man. He has 7 souls. You know, he was wounded about 6 or 7 times. We tried to get him, and he always escapes. And he taught us something very interesting last week. He sent a video to the Israeli soldiers, and people got this also on the WhatsApp, many people in Israel. And he said something amazing, and it reminds me of your lecture. He said, we are stronger than you, we the Muslims, because Hamas is very fanatic religious. And he said, our soldiers are ready to die, they want to die. You know, to be a shaheed is the highest level. It's a real mitzvah, you know, to be a shaheed. Because after you die for the Islam, you get 72 virgins. This is the story.
Turns out they're male, though.
Yeah, I don't know what you can do with 72 virgins after you blow up with TNT, but the idea, but that's why we are stronger than you, because you Jews, you sanctify life. Dushat HaChaim, you know, the Dushat HaChaim, and that's why you are so weak. And that's why the first goal of Hamas is to kidnap a Jewish soldier. That's what they tried so hard. Second idea I would like to remind you, know, in spite of all the situation, guys, I want you to know, I just came, I landed last night from Israel. I wanted to know, and all this month, I was so proud of our nation, and for me it's a nation, speaking about that in spite of the fact that we are attacked by 1,000 shells, Israelis are happy people. You know, everyone, there is a survey in the world, we get the highest place of happiness. And that's thought, it's not just enough to live, to have chaim, you know. I think the reason is because Israelis have something meaningful in their life. They're building something very special. And if you look at Viktor Frankl, yes, the search for meaning after the Holocaust, what he wrote, and Rav Kook, it's not enough to live. You need a goal. You need something meaningful to live for.
But that is the strength that I have found, at least in my life, that not just I wake up, I go and do whatever I have to do, but and I never use this as one of my sources, but it stayed with me. It's in Jewish text. It says one of the things that you have to do is you have to wake up like a lion. You have to wake up and get up and live every day.
Like a tiger.
Like a tiger.
As Kanamer, and a mare is a tiger, not a lion.
Like a tiger.
It's stronger than a lion.
Rabbi Yaffe, you want to?
Yes, one is just a point of fact. Since accidental death, manslaughter is under the realm of death. There's a principle that wherever there's anything that carries the death penalty, even if only a relative, a related crime carries the death penalty, because manslaughter is part of the spectrum of murder. There is no compensation. There is never any compensation under Jewish law ever for death. That's first of all. Wounding, yes, death, no. Secondly, precisely because of the issue you raised, of the absolute value of human life, we rather would place the obligation on the community to take care of widows and orphans and so on, than to engage in what, for example, takes place in Saudi Arabia, where the wealthy literally get away with murder because we assign a monetary value to a human life. Those who have a little bit dabbling in law know that Ford famously refused to fix the Pinto gas tank in the 70s at the cost of $4.22 per car, because they evaluated with 1 million cars out there and a value per human life of $50,000, it was cheaper not to fix it. Or at least that's the claim that Mother Jones made in their. They were a much more serious magazine, and they made this claim. At any rate, one other thing, I'm not quite understanding how you would get to this idea of shogeg, of manslaughter, halachic manslaughter in the Steinberg case. See, in other words, if he was sleepwalking, then he's a misasek. In other words, someone, it has to be some negligence. In other words, you have to be reaching back and then going forward with your axe in order to chop wood, and then the head flies off. You weren't careful about keeping the head secured properly. And it kills someone. Or you're climbing a ladder, you didn't check the ladder, and you fall down and kill the person. Those are the examples. If he was asleep, he's not at all in control of his actions, and it's the same as if I took a person and threw them on someone else, in which case that person is not liable. It's simply, misasek means as you go. There's no consciousness. So I'm not sure where you get this idea of this manslaughter under Jewish law idea for the Steinberg case.
Well, where it comes from is the fact that I don't find his temporary insanity defense substantiated. I don't believe the fact that that happened. Now, there is a doctor who was in the case, and he proved that it happened by dissociative reaction, that he was stabbing his wife, and it just, dissociative reaction, that he wasn't in control. I do not believe that, and I think it deals, again, I'm not a professional, I'm not a rabbi, and in my personal opinion, using the fact that I don't believe that, because it's based in belief, I would not go the route of that he was out of body doing this. I believe that he was in some way in there. So where this comes from is from my own personal understanding.
Why do you just believe that he deliberately did it and tried to get away with it?
That's another case. But I was wanting to hope to bring in the aspect of points of life.
Look, you did a good job with that.
Thank you.
Question?
Mine was almost the same. I was just wondering how, since in your paper and also in your presentation, it was very, very clear that you believed that he did it on purpose, that he made her out to be a criminal, that he wasn't actually asleep, that it wasn't an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't that be first-degree murder?
Yes, I see your point. The fact that if I don't believe his temporary insanity, if I don't believe that he didn't kill her by accident,
It's
but that's the
29
thing.
times is
That's the thing.
anger.
You see, that's the thing, and that's the idea that comes into play, the idea of truth. Is the fact that he didn't just say, I accidentally killed her. He killed her and he turned her afterwards into a monster in the case. He used every means available to get out of it. And more importantly, he called the police. He called the police and said someone broke into the house and killed his wife. Not an accident. I mean, not just not an accident. The fact is that he wasn't, he knew what happened. He knew what happened and he called the police and he tried to cover it up. And by the fact that he tried to cover it up, puts an entirely different light on it. And that's where an additional information at why I get this idea. I get this feeling that I worked off of.